Section 1. A quiet evening tonight feels quieter than usual. The windows are closed, the kettle has cooled, and the room holds its breath with me. I sit at the small table with a cup of tea that has already lost its warmth, watching the steam fade like a memory. Somewhere in the apartment, the clock keeps its steady rhythm, each second sounding like a gentle tap on the shoulder, reminding me that I am still waiting. I glance at my phone again. The screen lights up, then returns to darkness. No message, no call. I tell myself she is busy, or tired, or maybe already sleeping. But the silence settles deeper, like evening light slipping into every corner. It used to be different. There was a time when her calls arrived before I even realized I wanted to hear her voice. She would laugh, ask what I had eaten, remind me to rest, repeat simple things that somehow made the world feel safer. Back then, I never counted minutes. I never watched the clock with this quiet ache in my chest. Now I sit here, sipping the last of my tea, pretending I am not listening for the first vibration of the phone. I scroll through old conversations, reading words I already know by heart. I smile at small jokes we shared, and then I wonder when the tone between us began to change. Was it one forgotten holiday? One rushed conversation? Or something smaller? Something I didn't notice as it slowly slipped away? The night grows heavier outside, pressing gently against the glass. Cars pass in the distance, and someone laughs in the hallway, but none of it touches me. I am wrapped in a soft, patient waiting. I tell myself I will stop checking the phone, but my hand moves toward it again, as if it has learned the habit better than my heart. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe there is something she wanted from me that I never gave. I try to remember the last time we spoke, searching for sharp edges, for moments I might have missed. The questions stay with me, quiet but persistent, like the ticking clock across the room. I breathe in, slowly, and let the silence stay. For now, there's only the dim light, the empty cup, the unopened phone, and the feeling of wanting to hear a voice that does not arrive. So I sit a little longer, pretending the night still has time to change its mind, pretending the next second might surprise me. Hope doesn't shout anymore. It whispers softly, asking me to wait just a little more, even when the room feels empty and the silence feels endless. Tonight to Section 2. When calls meant everything when I think back. The phone used to sound like a promise. It didn't matter if it rang in the afternoon or late at night. The moment I heard her voice, the world softened, almost as if the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. I remember sitting cross-legged on the floor, the cord wrapped around my fingers, while my mother's laughter flowed through the line like warm light through an open window. She always began the same way, gentle and bright. She asked whether I had eaten, whether my homework was finished, whether I was sleeping enough. Simple questions, repeated again and again until they became a kind of lullaby. Even when the day had been heavy, those calls were small islands of peace. I believed, without doubt, that as long as she called, everything in my life would find its place. Sometimes she told me stories before bed. Her voice slowed, soft as a blanket, carrying tales about brave children, patient rivers, and stars that did not forget their way home. I would lie in the dark, the phone warm against my ear, pretending the story would never end. When she said goodnight, she always paused, as if making sure I was still there, as if listening for my breathing. There were evenings when rain touched the roof and thunder rolled far away. I used to worry then, imagining storms that could sweep the house away. But the phone would ring, and her voice would arrive, steady and calm. She said, "Everything is okay. I'm right here." And I would believe her. Fear had no room when her words filled the space. Looking back now, those moments feel like soft lamps glowing in a long hallway. They guided me through exams, through lonely days at school, through nights when I felt invisible. I didn't realize how deeply those calls stitched themselves into my heart. I didn't know I was learning what love sounded like, and yet, somewhere along the way, something shifted. The calls became shorter. The pauses grew longer. Sometimes days passed without a single ring, and I told myself it was normal, that adults get busy, that life changes. Still, the quiet began to hum inside me, a question I couldn't answer. I wonder, when did warmth turn into distance? Was there a moment I missed? A conversation I rushed? A thank you I forgot to say? I replay memories the way I once replayed her stories, hoping to find the page where everything changed. But the past stays silent, and the present sits beside me like a closed door now. When my phone rests on the table in the evening, I think about those childhood nights. I remember the safety, the laughter, the way love arrived through a thin line of wire. The silence I hear today feels louder because I once knew the sound of comfort so clearly. And somewhere inside that remembering, a quiet ache begins, asking what happened, and whether the promise of those old calls can ever return. I sit with that question the way you hold a fragile cup, afraid to drop it. Maybe answers are waiting in places I haven't faced yet, or maybe they are gone, like footsteps washed away by rain, leaving the night quiet around me still. Section 3. Growing distanced didn't happen in a single moment. There was no argument, no door slammed, no storm that carried everything away. Instead, distance arrived slowly, like fog. First there was school, homework, exams, new friends, late buses, and days that felt too short. I started answering the phone while thinking about something else, already planning what I needed to do next. I told myself it was normal. Growing up meant being busy. Growing up meant having less time to talk. Then came work. Schedules stretched, mornings began earlier, nights ended later. Some evenings I let the call ring and promised myself I would return it after dinner. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. Little by little, our conversations became practical, simple, careful. We spoke about bills, weather, appointments. The laughter that once filled the line appeared only as a memory, faint and far away. There were misunderstandings we never named. She worried, and her worry sounded like criticism. I tried to sound independent, and my independence sounded like distance. I thought she didn't trust me. She thought I didn't need her anymore. We never said those things out loud, but they sat between us like an invisible wall. I began to choose silence instead of explanation. When I was tired, I said I was fine. When something hurt, I said it wasn't important. I thought I was protecting her from my problems. Maybe I was really protecting myself from vulnerability. I don't know. All I know is that our calls grew shorter, and the space between them grew wide. There were nights when I looked at her name on my phone and felt a strange ache. I wanted to talk, to say something honest and simple. I miss you. But the words felt heavy. I told myself I would say it next time. There was always a next time. Until one day, there wasn't. Guilt arrived quietly, just like the distance had. I replayed small choices, the rushed goodbye, the unanswered message, the time I chose work over a visit. None of them seemed big on their own, but together they formed a road I hadn't meant to walk still. Hope lingered. I kept believing we could find our way back. Maybe one long conversation. Maybe one honest moment. Maybe all we needed was a quiet afternoon, tea on the table, and time to listen again. I imagined it often. The air softer, our voices slower, the wall finally opening into a door. Yet days continued to pass. Life kept asking for attention, louder and louder. And our connection, once bright and certain, turned into something fragile, like a thread you are afraid to pull too hard. I carried that thread carefully, not wanting it to break, not knowing how to strengthen it either. Now, when I think about those years, I see both of us trying in our own clumsy ways. Neither of us wanted to drift. Neither of us knew how to stay close while life kept moving. And somewhere between love and silence, we lost the easy language we once shared. Even so, I hold onto a quiet belief: distance is not the same as disappearance. Love does not vanish just because the words grow fewer. Somewhere behind the silence, I hope she is still reaching the way I am, slowly, uncertainly, but still reaching. Maybe one day, gently and without drama, we will find our way back to a simple conversation, the kind that doesn't try to fix the past, but quietly begins again, like morning light entering a familiar room and stays there with us both. Section 4. The missed birthday and my birthday. I told myself it was going to be just another day. I didn't make plans, didn't expect surprises, didn't light a candle. Still, somewhere deep inside, I waited. I waited the way a child waits by a window, pretending not to look while listening for footsteps. I checked my phone in quiet, casual ways, as if I were only seeing the time. Nothing. Afternoon passed. Evening arrived. The sky turned the color of slow smoke, and the house felt larger than usual, full of gentle echoes. I smiled at messages from friends and coworkers, typed thank you notes, used cheerful emojis. But every vibration that wasn't her number felt strangely hollow, like a box that rattles but holds nothing inside. I tried to explain it away. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she forgot what day it was. Maybe the signal was bad. Maybe she planned to call tomorrow, when minutes were cheaper. I built excuses like small shelters and stood under them, hoping they would keep the rain from touching me. The hours moved forward without asking my permission. I made tea. I washed dishes that were already clean. I scrolled through old photos and stopped quickly. When I saw her face smiling at a younger version of me, there were birthdays before this one. She used to call early in the morning, always with the same phrase, sung off-key. Laughing at herself, she would tell the story of my first day in the world, as if it were a favorite song she never grew tired of. Those memories rose up like warm air and then faded, leaving a soft ache behind. I whispered that it was fine, that adults don't need attention, that love is not measured by phone calls. Still, the silence felt personal, almost like a decision. A few times I hovered over the call button. I could have reached out first. I could have said, "Hi, it's my birthday." But pride and fear tangled together. What if she truly had forgotten? What if reminding her made the emptiness louder? So I chose to be brave in the quietest way possible. I did nothing. I let the night close over the day and pretended the weight on my chest was only fatigue. Lying in bed, I wondered what was happening on her side of the phone. Was she tired sitting alone with the television murmuring in the background? Was she laughing with neighbors, not noticing the date? Was she hurt about something I said months ago, waiting for me to apologize? Or had life simply grown heavy for her, too heavy to carry memories the way she used to? I didn't have answers. I only had the dark room, the soft glow of the screen, and the quiet knowledge that love can bruise without meaning to. I told myself tomorrow would bring clarity. Tomorrow, maybe the call would come, and her voice would wash the day clean. But as sleep finally reached me, another thought lingered. Sometimes the moments that hurt the most are not the ones that explode. They are the ones that never arrive. In that quiet absence, I learned how silence can shape the heart, teaching patience, doubt, tenderness, and a longing that waits like a small light in darkness forever. Section 5. A small ray of hope happened on a gray afternoon months after the birthday. I tried to forget. Rain moved across the windows in thin, quiet lines, and I was making dinner for one, stirring slowly. thinking of nothing and everything at the same time. The doorbell rang, soft and uncertain, as if the finger that pressed it wasn't sure it belonged there. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. She stood there with a plastic bag of groceries and an awkward smile. Her hair was pulled back, damp from the weather. She said, almost apologizing, that she was passing by and thought she would stop for a minute. I felt my heart trip over itself. I stepped aside and let her in. She noticed the simple meal on the stove and laughed gently, saying I still cooked the way I did as a child, careful and slow. She set the bag on the counter and began unpacking things she knew I liked: fruit, noodles, a small cake without candles. She didn't say the word birthday, but the meaning hovered between us like steam from the pot. We ate together at the little table. Conversation began in small pieces, like broken shells. She asked about work, about my sleep, about whether I was saving money. I answered, and then I asked about her health. She shrugged and smiled, the way people do when they don't want worry to grow. A few times, silence sat with us, but it wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like a pause in a song. Halfway through the meal, she touched my hand and said she was sorry, not in a dramatic way, not with tears or big promises, just a simple apology that came out almost like a sigh. She said life had been noisy lately, full of bills and doctors and neighbors who needed help. She said sometimes she forgot dates, but she never forgot love. Those words landed carefully, like feathers. I felt something open inside me, a small door I had closed without knowing. I told her I understood, and part of me truly did. Growing up teaches you that even the people you love carry invisible weights. We washed the dishes together afterward, passing plates back and forth, moving in rhythm the way we once did when I was younger. Before she left, she placed the cake in my fridge and told me to eat it when I felt ready. At the doorway, she hugged me, not too tight, not too long, but long enough to remind me of every time she had held me before. She said, "I'm trying," and I believed her. After she walked away and the rain began again, the apartment didn't feel as empty. The unanswered calls, the silence, the missed moments didn't disappear, but they softened. I realized love isn't always loud or perfectly timed. Sometimes it arrives late, carrying groceries, whispering apologies, and sitting quietly while soup simmers. That evening, hope didn't come as fireworks. It came as warmth, steady and ordinary, settling gently in the place where hurt had been. Later, as I washed the last cup, I felt grateful not for perfection, but for effort. Love, I realized, sometimes speaks in half-finished sentences and imperfect timing. It asks us to notice the small gestures, to listen between the pauses, to believe that care can return in quiet ways. That night, I slept more easily, carrying a softer story inside me, one stitched with forgiveness, patience, and the gentle promise that tomorrow might open a little wider. For both of us, slowly, together. Section 6, Silence Again. Morning comes with soft light slipping across the curtains, and the room feels quiet in a familiar way. I reach for my phone before I even sit up. The screen wakes, bright and empty. No missed calls, no new messages. Only the same icons, the same wallpaper, the same small expectation I try not to admit. I tell myself it's fine. She is busy. She is resting. She will call later. I say it the way someone repeats a prayer, hoping the words will make it true. I make coffee and listen to the slow drip, the tiny clicks of the clock on the wall. Time feels louder when you are waiting. Every sound in the house becomes a reminder of what is not happening. I keep my phone close, as if distance might offend it somehow. I set it on the table, then bring it with me to the sink, then back again. Pretending it's simply habit. At lunch, I open our old messages and scroll. There are photos of meals she cooked, pictures of plants growing crooked on her balcony, small jokes, reminders to wear warm clothes. I listen to an old voice message where she laughs and says my name the way only she can. The sound travels straight to the soft part of my chest. For a moment, I almost forget we are in this strange season of silence. I think about calling. My finger hovers over her name. A part of me wants to break the distance, to say, "Hi, I just wanted to hear your voice." Another part holds back, uncertain and proud, afraid that reaching out might prove something I don't want to face, that I am the one who needs, that I am still the child in the story. I tell myself to wait one more day, as if the calendar is in control of the heart. Afternoon fades into evening. The light turns softer, then thinner, then gone. I heat leftovers, eat slowly, and wash a single plate. The apartment breathes with a quiet that feels almost polite. I sit on the couch and scroll again through pictures, birthdays, markets, hospital corridors, sunny days by the window. I notice how often we smile while hiding questions we never asked. The sadness that comes is not sharp anymore. It arrives like a low tide, steady and patient. It doesn't shout. It simply sits beside me, reminding me that love and waiting often live in the same room. I feel tired of hoping and still, somehow, unable to stop. Before bed, I place the phone on the nightstand, screen facing up, just in case. I whisper a small promise to myself: if she doesn't call tomorrow, I will be brave enough to try first. Maybe. I close my eyes and listen to the quiet house, to my own breathing, to the long, unbroken line of silence stretching into the dark, gentle, heavy, and full of questions. Somewhere beyond the window, a car passes, then another, and life keeps moving without asking my permission. I lie still, letting night gather around me, carrying the quiet hope that tomorrow will sound different, even if only by a single, fragile ring. Until then, I wait, breathing slowly, learning how to sit with longing tonight. Section 7. The truth I didn't see happened slowly, like a window clearing after fog. One evening, while scrolling through the same photos I had memorized, I noticed something I had ignored before. In each picture, my mother was smiling, but the smile looked thinner around the edges. Her shoulders curved forward a little more. Her hands, once quick and strong, were always resting, as if they were tired of carrying the world. I had been measuring her love by the number of calls she made, but I had never asked what those days felt like for her. I began to remember small details. The way she paused on the stairs. The way she repeated stories, forgetting she had told them already. The quiet sigh she tried to hide when she sat down. Maybe time was pressing on her differently than it pressed on me. A thought arrived that I didn't want. What if she wasn't distant because she didn't care? What if she was distant because she didn't know how to keep up anymore? I imagined her in her kitchen, reaching for the phone, then putting it back down. Maybe she worries she will disturb me. Maybe she thinks my life is too busy, too important, too far away from hers. Maybe she believes silence is a gift, a way of letting me be free. And maybe, sometimes, she is lonely to. I saw how easily love can turn into fear. Parents are not trained for the moment their children step into another life. They stand at the doorway, unsure of the right distance. Too close, and they seem controlling. Too far, and they feel forgotten. It is a narrow road, and pride walks beside them. I thought about the times I answered her quickly, half listening, rushing to end the call. I remembered the messages I left unread because I told myself I would reply later. I realized that my silence had spoken too, and she had listened. The story I had been telling myself that she didn't care was simpler than the truth. The truth was softer, heavier, and more complicated. We were both learning how to love from afar, and both of us were afraid of doing it wrong. That night, I felt something shift. Not guilt exactly, and not blame. It was more like a gentle understanding settling into place. I still wished she would call. I still missed the sound of her voice. But I also saw her as a person again, not only as my mother, but as a woman facing age, memory, distance, and the quiet rooms of her own life. The silence between us no longer looked like punishment. It looked like two hearts trying to find each other in the dark, moving slowly, uncertain, and still somehow connected. In that tenderness, blame faded, and a softer kind of courage began to grow, whispering that understanding might be the first bridge home for both of us. Section 8. Reaching out first. I stared at the phone for a long time before I touched it. It lay on the table like a small, silent door, and I kept imagining what might be waiting on the other side. My heart beat louder than the clock on the wall. I told myself it was just a call, nothing more, but it felt like crossing a bridge that could break beneath my feet. My fingers trembled when I searched for her name. For a moment, I almost backed away. Pride whispered, "Let her call first." Fear added, "What if she doesn't answer?" Then a quieter voice rose inside me, patient and steady. "If you love someone, you can take one small step. So I pressed the button. The ringing sound stretched out, thin and endless. Each pause between tones felt like a question. I pictured her in the kitchen, or sitting by the window, maybe not hearing it at first. I was already planning what to say if the call went to voicemail. I would keep it simple, light, almost casual, as though I were not carrying months of silence in my chest. Then I heard her voice. She said my name like it was both a surprise and a relief, as if she had been holding her breath without realizing it. Her hello was soft and a little shaky. I smiled before I could answer. The first words were ordinary. "How are you? Have you eaten? How is work?" But beneath them flowed something warmer, like a river moving quietly under ice. We talked about small things. The weather, a recipe she had tried, the neighbor's new dog. Every now and then our words slowed, and there were gentle pauses. Not the heavy kind filled with worry, but the kind that let us breathe. I could hear dishes in the background, the sound of water, the faint echo of the house. It felt like I had stepped back into a familiar room. I wanted to apologize for the distance. I wanted to ask why she hadn't called. Those questions hovered at the edge of my tongue, but I let them rest. Instead, I listened. I told her a story from my day. I laughed at her small joke, and in that quiet exchange, something softened between us. Before we said goodbye, she told me to take care, the way she always used to. Her voice lingered, warm and careful. When the call ended, the room didn't feel empty anymore. It felt steady, peaceful, like a light had been turned on somewhere I could not see. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing was fully fixed. But the distance didn't feel impossible now. One call had become a thread, fragile yet real, pulling us gently back toward each other, reminding me that sometimes hope doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it begins with the courage to dial. And in that small, trembling moment, I understood that love can move quietly, choosing patience over pride, and still feel strong inside. Section 9. What the call meant. We didn't talk about the heavy things. We didn't dig through the past or try to solve every wound at once. Instead, we started with the weather. She said the air was getting cooler at night, and she had taken out an old sweater she loved. I pictured it, threadbare at the sleeves, soft from years of wear, and something inside me relaxed. We talked about dinner next. She laughed, quietly, telling me she had burned the rice because she forgot she was cooking while watering the plants. I remembered that same laugh from my childhood, the way it used to drift down the hallway like a small, warm light. I didn't realize how much I had missed it. Minutes passed like gentle waves. We moved from food to memories, to the stray cat that keeps visiting her back door, to the neighbor who now walks with a cane. None of it was important, and yet all of it was. Because beneath every ordinary sentence was a softer truth. We were still here, still choosing one another, even after distance, silence, pride, and misunderstandings. The conversation wasn't perfect. There were pauses, places where we didn't know what to say. But the quiet didn't feel dangerous anymore. It felt like space, like breathing room. I noticed how carefully she asked about my days, not wanting to pry, but wanting to be close. And I found myself answering honestly, not performing, not defending, just talking. The call stretched gently, like dusk taking its time to fade at some point. I realized my shoulders weren't tense. My voice wasn't shaking. I wasn't waiting for the moment everything would fall apart. Instead, I was listening to my mother talk about the tomatoes she was trying to grow, and it felt strangely like a blessing. When we finally said goodbye, it wasn't dramatic. No speeches, no sudden miracles, just a simple promise to talk again soon. Yet when the line went quiet, I sat there for a long time, holding the calm in my chest. Healing didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like this, a small conversation, a steady presence. The quiet knowing that love doesn't have to be perfect to matter. And for the first time in a long while, I believed we still had time to talk, to try again, to meet each other gently, without fear, without hurry. Alive together. Section 10, gentle lesson. There was something quiet waiting for me at the end of that call. Something I had spent years running past without noticing. Love isn't always loud. It doesn't always arrive wrapped in perfect sentences or grand gestures. Sometimes it hides inside the simplest moments, a question asked softly, a voice that stays, a goodbye that promises another tomorrow. For so long, I thought love meant being understood completely. Now I see that sometimes it means choosing to understand first. Sometimes it means taking the first step, even when our pride trembles, even when the past feels heavy. Reaching out didn't erase what hurt. It didn't rewrite history, but it opened a window, and the air felt different. As I sat there afterward, I felt something small settle inside me, not excitement, not triumph, just a steady kind of peace. A reminder that connection doesn't need to be perfect to be real. That tenderness can exist even in families that struggle to say the right words. If you're listening to this, maybe there is someone whose number sits quietly in your phone. Someone you miss, but don't quite know how to approach. Maybe the distance feels permanent. Maybe the silence has become familiar. You don't have to fix everything today. You don't have to say anything remarkable. Sometimes a simple, "Hey, I was thinking about you," is enough to begin. And if the call feels too hard, start smaller. Send a message. Offer a moment. Leave the door open. What surprised me most was not how my mother answered, but how my own heart answered back, softer, less afraid. Tonight, I'm grateful, not for perfection, but for another chance. For the lesson that love, when handled gently, has a way of finding its way home for us all.